Hello and welcome everyone to this afternoon's FA Hot Topic webinar. It's nice to have a kick-off at 3 o'clock. Always the best time to kick off, isn't it? Welcome. Today we've got Paul Holder and Paul McGuiness and myself, Graeme Carrick, FA coach developers. And we're going to be chatting. It's going to be quite informal, chatting about coaching in the youth development phase. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, and hopefully it'll be really informal. So please do feed your questions in via the chat box, and we will do our best to answer them as we go and pick things up as we go. One of the key things working in any age phase, but especially in the youth development phase, is developing in the kids a real love of the ball and deep love of the game. And on a recent webinar that I did with Paul McGuiness, we talked about the spirit of football. And just to get us going before we get into the discussion, just going to play this video from Gareth Southgate talking about the importance of developing a real deep love of the ball and love of the game in this youth development phase.
The key for me is enjoyment, is that maybe one of our children comes through and plays at a high level, men's or women's game. But generally, the numbers and the percentages that we're dealing with are minimal. And for all of them, it's got to be fun. We've got to help them to fall in love with the game. If we can help them to improve and guide them and help them learn and improve, then that is, of course, an equally important ambition to have. But I think enjoyment and being a mentor, being somebody who is a role model for those young kids is really important.
So remember, when you're stepping in and winning it, can you keep the ball?
So I guess regardless of whatever setting you're coaching or whoever you are coaching, boys or girls or whatever setting that's in, developing a real deep love of the ball and love of the game and the kids is ultimately what we have to do, and never forgetting about the essence of the game. I don't know whether you want to jump in, Paul, or also I'll be referring to Paul Holder as Noddy from times naturally. So just to let you know that at the start. Yeah, jump in around the love of the ball and love of the game.
I don't think in these ages they fall in love with the game. I think the danger is them falling out of love with it. You know, they come armed with it. You know, like they've been playing, a lot of them, since they were 5. Probably loved every minute. The key is to keep them in love with the game as they go through it. That's that's for me, and then everything that's associated with that. So that's the responsibility, is to maintain that love, not to create it, unless obviously they've had a bad experience before. But most of the kids I know who's the team, they've had a great time.
And I guess if they have had a bad experience, you can still like rekindle that flame, can't you? By giving them a good experience. If they do come and have another go at football, it's just vital that we don't lose sight of the essence of the game, especially as the kids get to 11v11, and just at times it can just become far too serious too soon, can't it?
Well, it doesn't take much for them to, if they've had a bit of a downtime, and they've had a bad experience for whatever it is, it doesn't take much to put them back on track. It's not a game that, like, as soon as they start playing again and feel valued and, are with their mates mainly, they'll be back on it. That flame will be burning brightly.
So, Paul, just on that, so again, that's really important for players and kids in grassroots football, but it's equally as important for kids in academies and talent settings.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I love that spirit, that phase, the spirit of football. It's, you can get it, that feeling of it coming up inside you, and the glow of it. You see the top players you've had it. You think of Gaza over the years, people like that. You just exude that fun and enjoyment of playing. And that's the role of the coach here, to be a role model, to role model that enthusiasm and fun. And that comes in all sorts of ways. It comes from, skills on the ball, it being clever off the ball, clever defending, outwitting your opponent in a cunning battle. There's all sorts of ways to, ignite and then fuel that love of the game. And of course, then there's the combination with people, how much teamwork comes into it, and how much you love and start connecting with people. I know from the foundation phase at first, lots of kids, they're very much insular, looking at the ball and themselves. But then as they get older in this phase, you really get an enjoyment out of becoming a team and connecting with your teammates.
So in terms of being able to do that, as I said, vital, and it'll feel and look different to different people, won't it? And that people have their own sort of connection with the game. And one of the massive areas that we need to get right for this to happen is around developing the environment. But I guess before that, we need to understand who the kids are, don't we? Who they are, what stage they're at, why do they come and play, where are they on their journey, what story are they on their own sort of, what page are they on in their own story, really. So we need to really start from that point, don't we? Of, like, who are the kids and why do they even come?
Yeah, if you don't know the motivation of the kids in front of you, how are you going to put the environment down that suits them? The spirit of the game for me is like feel and sense of the game. It's an emotional thing, and the coaches have got to be teenagers as well, a bit of mischief in them. They've got to have a bit of emotion in them in these ages, because it can become so stale, and you've got to show some vulnerability, like teenagers now and again. I remember I've an affinity to these ages, and this is obvious because I was a teenager once, but the idea is you should be able to tap into what that was like, and the game was about feel and sense and emotions, and I think that sometimes you can make it so a bit sterile and take that out of it. Do you know what I mean?
Why do you think that comes in? What that type of why do you think it becomes sterile?
Well, I think you're looking for. I just think you race them on, trying to make them perfect, and actually they're in a phase where this phase is where experimenting is really important to them, and sometimes we don't really want to do that because it messes up the score, messes up the team, so. I think you've got to recognise that teenagers in particular are really open to experimenting and doing things slightly different. That's why you have to have a bit of devil in you when you're a coach. You have to be you're not with them, but you're not one of them, but you're with them. Do you see what I mean?
I think, Graeme, as well, just coming back to the point you made before about knowing players and having a feel for them and a trust so that there's a relationship there is very important. And of course, that applies at grassroots and all the way up. But certainly at the very top level, it was a big part of Sir Alex Ferguson's success. I was part of that sort of background team for years. And Sir Alex got to know the players who came to the young players who came to the first team from very early age. He would know, say, for instance, trials. He would come to the trials under 14s, come and watch. He'd get to know the background of them from the scouts. Then what would happen at the end of the week, we'd have a meal with all the players who'd come from all over the country, British Isles at that time. And he'd have a meal, he'd go and chat to all the players. All the scouts were there. He made sure all the coaches, the first team coaches, reserve coaches, all the others were there. And at the end, it was amazing, really, because somebody would have to get up and say a little speech, one of the players. They'd all go in collar and tie. Darren Fletcher would get up and give a little speech. And then there'd be a sing-song. So the Scottish boys would sing Bonnie Scotland, and then it would be Danny Boy from the Irish boys, and then it would be all the different parts of England. And he was bonding with them then and getting and he's observing them in action. The next step would be that they would come to Old Trafford, and he would meet the parents, and he'd do this at 2 o'clock before a 3 o'clock kickoff. So they got an idea of he valued them, and he set down the rules straight away. They've got to be dedicated, they've got to work hard, but we will give them so much in return. And then he was constantly coming and seeing them. He would, even though it wasn't his team, he would say to me, "Bring those under 18s in my office," and he'd sit there and he'd do a quiz on the dimensions of the pitch and take the mickey out of them because they didn't know the goal should be 8 yards wide or 8 foot wide, or what was the dimensions of the penalty area. And then he'd send them out again and have a bit of a laugh. And then the next minute you'd see he sat on the bench with the under 11 coaches. So, if you look at that, his secret for success was all that class of 92 and so on. he had so much trust in them as young players because he'd been there every step of the way. But there was the other side to it. They had every trust in him because he knew all the parents' names, he knew who they were. They had a real belief in each other. And although that's the very top level, you know, the same sort of thing, obviously in a smaller way, can happen in the grassroots football if you're looking after people. You know, that's vital. And if you get to know their background, their interests, really important.
And I think Noddy said about remembering that we were teenagers once. And it's really useful to just consider, like, who were you when you were 12? Who were you when you were 14? What were you getting up to? What was important to you in your lives? But more importantly, like, considering for the kids that we're coaching now, of what do they need? How should they feel? What do they need to feel? What's right? And that comes from why they come and who they are as individuals. So it's really important. One of the challenges we face is we have this battle around the phases and age groups, where there is some things that happen in the foundation phase which are different to the youth development phase. But sometimes, because we section off the phases, we forget that we're just talking about children moving through their journey. And a kid at 12, 13 shouldn't look too different or feel too different all of a sudden to a child who's been playing in the foundation phase 11. And don't skip past those stages too soon, because you can't really go back. So we just need to consider, what's it like being a kid that age? What environment do they need? And it will slightly differ for the different children that we're coaching in the different settings. And that's why there's not one size fits all answer, or this is the way to do it. But there is some key things to consider, are like, can they be themselves when they're with you? Do they need to seek permission to be themselves? Or do they feel valued? Do they feel part of something? Paul's mentioning there. Do they feel that they can contribute and express themselves, certainly through those ages? But especially when we think about 12s, 13s, 14s, there's a question that came in about, and it's about academies, but I'm going to ask the question to you about just generally, because I think you can probably, it's relevant to grassroots football just as much, around, do you think kids from 9s to 12s are put under too much pressure?
I think the system pressurizes them naturally. I mean, the word contract comes out at 9. You know, when you're fighting for a contract and you're going, oh, you know, if you're in your last year of what they call the foundation phase, and then suddenly you're right, you need to go into the YDP phase. You're fighting for a contract and stuff like that. There's natural pressures on them, but that in some respects that's a natural thing to happen. Happens in all sorts of sports and ballet and all that. You know, you get that's the nature of selecting people. But the problem you got is there is no, the phases are a problem, because you know the kid leaves primary school in July or June or whenever it is, but maybe July, and then all of a sudden he's in the YDP and everything changes. He's only a month older, you know, and so it is exactly that, recognizing where this kid is and what he's like. But I think going back to Paul's point about, I'll come back to the pressure thing. Paul's point is Alex Ferguson and that explain. If you show interest in, you know, kids, you know, recognize when you're interested in them, you know, and interested in what they, because they respect that. So how much are we interested in them, really? You know, do we really know and are interested in what they say, or do we just say, oh yeah, very nice, and move on? Do you know what I mean?
Noddy, that brings me back very much to all through my school childhood. You know, school teachers taking the games and so on. We didn't in our day have a lot of coaching academies and so on. But the teacher I remember most was a guy called Andy Black, Mr. Black. And the reason I remember him most is he took me for English, and he taught me Shakespeare and all the poets and everything else. And it was the way he taught that lesson made me fall in love with that, as well as football. Now, when it came to the football, he took the football team, but basically he said to me, "Look, you know more about football than I do. You know, you get on with it." And he just sat back. And what he did was made sure that everybody behaved themselves, was respectful to the referee, and a lot of fair play. But he also would, you know, chat to me about other things than football, you know. So that's important as well. He was talking. He took us down to London to watch plays, to the theatre. amazing experiences alongside the football. So in grassroots and also in academies, it's important you have a balance. You know, you give them different experiences. We had that Man United going on unbelievable tours. We went on a tour to Kenya. It was life-changing. We were in the slums. We were playing football in the slums. We were doing charity work. We went to orphanages, HIV clinics. We did all these things that were just amazing experiences. And there was one school we went to, the Stahare Boys School, school for boys, and they were all orphans, so they'd been taken off the street. And what they had above the door was a sign that said, "From those to whom much has been given, much will be required." Now we're there with all these kids who from Man United with everything, and these kids are off the street, and they were instilling in their kids that they had, a lot to do, in life. They had to make sure they'd been given an opportunity of an education, and our lads had everything they could want for. So it was definitely a humbling experience, and one that we really learned from in terms of the players. So in that sense, what I'm saying is there's a balance to the football and everything else. And if you've got a chance to influence kids through football, you can also influence them, in other ways. And that was definitely a life-changing, sort of a very memorable experience for all the people that were on it. And a reminder, very much now I'm looking at, Marcus Rashford doing that in the last week or so. He's thought of other people, and there'll be much required. So he stood up, and when something is required this week, he's done that. And maybe a little bit of that is through all the background of all the coaches throughout the academy that have been reminding him, as Jim Ryan used to say, he had a good phrase, right is might. And you keep telling that to kids about fair play and doing the right thing and off the field, then certainly you can have a big influence them as people, because let's face it, most of them are not going to be footballers, but they can use the lessons of football, to improve them as people.
I think it's just really important to consider what's your most important role as a coach in this phase. What do the players or the kids need from you? And that different kids might need some slightly different things, and you can't be everything to everyone. I don't mean that, but being a role model, being a mentor for youngsters can actually often be the most important thing. When you believe in them when maybe somebody else wouldn't, or you show patience when they're going through some stuff, or because they'll generally become more independent. They'll generally test the boundaries. They're sort of built to do that. That's the age, and it's good because they're learning. But that can make it challenging as a coach in whatever setting that you're working in, boys and girls, where they will test boundaries. But it's important I think really important in this age phase as coaches to recognise our role in setting boundaries in a way that the kids can, so it's safe for the kids to explore. But they need to explore their behaviours. They need to figure out who they are. They'll be searching for their identity, both as kids and as players. So we need to really understand that is a huge part, probably the biggest part of our role, about being that type of role model. And John McDermott talks about some of them. The only thing kids hate more than rules is no rules at all. So
they're capable of sticking to rules, and they know the consequences. It's interesting. I wonder how many clubs sort of allow coaches to stay with the group in the later part of foundation phase, and then in the first part of their youth development phase. In that period where they're moving through. Sometimes we just pass over. You become, all right, I do the under 12s, and now I pass over to the under 13s. Wonder if there's if anyone sort of takes kids through at a 3-year cycles if they're in the club that long, so that they get to know them a little bit better, and then come round again. I know they do that in some schools, but the thing is, and I'm still hanging on to that question about, do I think 9 to 12-year-olds are put under too much pressure in academies? I think that's a great question. Yeah, but
I think a lot of the time, Noddy, just by the nature of it, the whole thing gets exaggerated. So they're put under enormous pressure. And what we have to remember here, And I always like the sort of quote from Rousseau that going back, he said children, or the development of children is quite often a time where you must waste time to gain time. And you're thinking about, what's he talking about there? But in very much, I would say, people are rushing and pushing to get them towards the professional game. But in lots of ways, you're better off just, hang on, they're kids. Let's make them, or let's let them enjoy their childhood, because once that's gone, it's finished. You know, your childhood is a once only opportunity. And I'll tell you this, in football, the best players have carried on and carried their childhood on. The likes of Messi, Ronaldo, and so on, they've carried on that childhood love of the game and imagination, so that they keep reinventing themselves with new tricks and so on, because they love the game so much. So the coach that wants to make the under 12, 13, 14 team look like the first team, he may well be going against that. He thinks he's wasting time by doing childish sort of practice, when in fact that's the best time to do it, because how do you learn? You learn by copying. So you need imagination. So at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, they don't mind making a fool of themselves, in a sense. They don't mind role playing. They don't mind pretending they're Messi or whoever, if you let them. A little bit later, when they're 15, 16, they start to be more worried about what everybody else is thinking. And so you've got to make the most of those years where they will experiment and try and create an environment where they can pretend to be Messi or whoever's their favorite player. And you really want to make the most of that time for them to experiment and explore and create an atmosphere where that can happen, I would say.
I'm just going to play a video on that point, Paul, from Kev Betsy, the England. Well, he works for the 17s now. We did this interview when he's working with the 16s, but it's around how the national coaches try to create the environment with the national teams, 15s to 17s.
We'll put on different things in terms of on the grass, off grass, to show them that we are there to support them. This place is a place you can make mistakes. This is an environment where we want your feedback. You're allowed to communicate. We want you to talk. So we put loads of different things in our armoury that gives them that feeling that they're able to express. There might be a training session that will go on and the player might make a mistake. That's an opportunity to then say, well done, next time, or whatever it may be. There's going to be some moments that we can use to reinforce our messages with using praise as one method.
And I think that really highlights, even working with England teams, the importance of the environment in any age phase, but especially in this age phase, that the kids can be themselves, that they can make mistakes and learn from their mistakes, and the environment supports that, and it's a safe enough environment for that to occur. But one of the things we think is important is it doesn't feel too serious. And Paul, you talk a lot about playfulness, and you've sort of highlighted this, Noddy, haven't you, with this slide? Do you want to just talk to us about playfulness and the importance of it?
Yeah, but I think playfulness is not about just putting things on and having a laugh. Playfulness is about taking the game, and sometimes you're wedded to the outcome. In other words, you're tired. You've got this thing. You've planned this session, and whatever happens, we're going to get these outcomes from it. Whatever happens, and sometimes the kids of these ages will take you down a road, and you think, "Blimey, they're doing all right here. I'm going to stick with this. You know, I'm not going to go down this. I'm not going to be tied to this outcome that I want. I'm going to go with this, with whatever happens." And sometimes that's really clever coaching, is to recognise the moment. You know, I've done it many times where I've got all these plans, and then I do a practice. I think, blimey, this is going all right, and I'll just keep doing it over and over, keep doing it. Just keep on it all the time. And then suddenly you think, well, I haven't got the outcome I require, but I did get this. And so I think it's about sensing what's happening with the group when you're taking some practice. And quite the opposite. Sometimes you have to shut things down quite quickly. they're not happening. But playfulness is about, it's about having a bit of mischief in you as a coach and thinking. And I remember, and I'll have to say it. And at Brighton, they had a running hill, and you're supposed to sprint up and down it and get knackered, So it's quite steep. And you do all your testing, and GPS and all that. And so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I'll put a goal at each end. All right. So I put a goal at each end. And of course, if you look at, I think, once the sports scientists regained consciousness, I think they came to terms with it. But it was like I looked at it and I went, I tell you what, could be good fun, but also you get a lot out of it. And it's on this really steep hill. So going up the hill, all the best trying to get it in the goal. You had to down going down the hill, all the best trying to dribble. And it was really good. Throw-ins were interesting, I'll get that. But it was a good suddenly appeared in the air. But the kids really liked it. And actually the outcomes from it, and that was just looking at something and thinking we could have some fun with this. Also, like in practices, sometimes I would, and it's not, sometimes I think, what we can do here. So sometimes I used to do tip-offs, in the middle of a game. You play a game and say, instead of having a free kick or a throw, we have a tip-off, basketball tip-off. In other words, you put a big kid against a little kid or something and just tip it like that. And then the ball's in the air and then you have to start again. So it's a bit random and they seem to like that. So I think it's about taking games and looking at situations going, if I change that or have a go at that, this could be interesting. But you still get some outcomes from it. It's not just running up and down a hill, and giggling, So I think playfulness is about, you've got to be playful as a coach, but that doesn't mean you're not planned. It doesn't mean you've got, you're just thinking, you haven't planned anything, you just throw a ball in there and have a go and have a laugh. Yeah. Bouncy castle style. It's not like that. But I think this is really important, not being wedded to the outcome. Because
I think, and with that, you said you've got to be in it with the kids, as you're saying. You've got to be in the moment. You've got to coach in the moment to be able to do that. But I think playfulness is important for enjoyment. The players have got a feel, and coaches, that it's all right for coaches to enjoy coaching the kids. Yeah. That's actually important. But it's important for enjoyment for everyone involved. But it's also important for learning. It's a great way of learning, the curiosity that you're trying to get into the players. It's a great. We want them to be immersed in the game, doing it, have that type of curiosity and imagination, and expressing themselves and testing the boundaries and testing their own possibilities. And that all comes with that feeling of, as you say, that feeling of sort of playfulness.
Yeah, and then, like games. You sometimes you see small-sided games and you think, how do you restart these games? And you think of restarts and you think, this would be interesting if somebody slung a ball in from 30 yards in the air, and had to enter the game for that. And by the time, the ball's in the air, so that's how the game starts. The game starts from a different point. You've got different restarts. You've got just a few rules that might change. You might change the environment. You might free goalies. It's just about playing with what you've got, but not compromising the health and safety and all that, but just having a bit of fun with the game. And kids love it, and then that could be part, and then you might have a serious sort of practice or something after that. But you've got to build some playfulness in somewhere.
Yeah, I think Graeme, on that point, it's a good point, Graeme, to come in with the themes that we sort of developed at Man United that helped to create a playful atmosphere both on and off the field, but also had some good messages underneath them. So one particular one that, it was the first one that really started as successful. We had an under-12 team who were going to the Dallas Cup, but we didn't have quite enough of a squad. So we borrowed some players from elsewhere who came to join us, but they were only joining last minute. We thought, well, how are we going to get this team together? But we thought we'd be okay attacking-wise, but defensively, we wanted them to become more of a team. So we only had 2 or 3 days training. So as Jim Ryan and I were thinking through what would we do, and we said we might play British Bulldogs so they get the idea of being close together. And then we thought of maybe having them tied together with a rope so they were close and they would get the idea of being compact. And as it went along, we said, well, we need a symbol for this. So Jim said, well, why don't we call them a chain? So we had this idea of the chain, and actually we were having a coffee in the afternoon. We went back, we thought about it a bit longer. We met for a drink later on at the night, and then we started to think, well, chain, that's good for the defending. But each letter could mean something. So each letter meant something. So it was compact, hard to beat, attack the ball, in position, never switch off. And we were thinking a bit longer, and it got more and more creative. So then we said, well, we think they're only 12. Maybe they could have a hacker before the games, that they knew what they were going to do. So each letter had like a sign for it. So it was compact like that. Then it was hard to beat. And then it was attack the ball. And then it was in position. And then it was, it was in position like this down here. And then it was never switch off. So we got this idea. So we got going with it. We did the practice. We did British Bulldog. We showed them films of the Lions. And then the night before we were due to go away, we did a little exercise where we were introducing it, aims of the trip and all this. And coming past was Bill Bezic, the sports psychologist, who was in the hotel, and we explained to him what was going on. He said, that's great, lads. And he said, when you'll need this chain most, when will you need it most? You'll need it most when there's a problem. So we thought nothing of that and went off. Then we got on, but we started to have other things. So there was a chain shout. If they're in the airport and you shout chain, they all had to come together and make a chain so nobody was off. On the plane, they were doing it. And it got more and more. We started to have the music from on the bus from Fleetwood Mac. The Grand Prix music. You'll never break the chain is the lyrics. So all this stuff is going on. We did brilliantly. We were beating teams left, right, and centre. It was on TV and all around the hotel. And we started to turn it into something off the field. So off the field, we started to say, well, you've got to be compact. You can't have these new lads away. You've got to all be a team together. You can't have cliques. So make sure you stick together. You've got to be hard to beat in terms of standards of behaviour. You've got to attack the experience. You've got to be in position. So you've got to be in position in the hotel at the right time, at the right place. And then you've got to never switch off your responsibility. Now, everybody was going mad about us. The hotel staff saying how well we'd done, and the waitresses, and we were great ambassadors, all this. So there was I think it was Fila had a in one of the rooms, they were the sponsors. And 4 or 5 of our lads went in the room and they gave them free boots, free gear, free tracksuits, just 6 of them. So we were then sat around by the pool, actually. It was a nice trip. It was very nice. And one of the lads, I'll never, ever forget this, one of the most memorable bits in my football sort of career, a lad called Damien Allen. He came with all his gear and he said, I want to give my stuff back. And we said, hang on. He said, it's breaking the chain. Everybody's arguing off the pitch. And we said, hang on, let's have a meeting. So all the kids sat around the pool and they all, 12-year-olds, decided off their own back to hand all the gear back. Now, that was amazing. Now, the Fila people, all the people around heard about it and they were amazed that these kids had done this. Now, through a simple theme, we'd got a life, well, I've remembered it for the lifelong, and I think all of them probably will have done, about team spirit. Now, we got on the bus to go to the final, and I knew we were going to win the game. There was no doubt in my mind, because they were all for 12-year-olds, they were all glazed eyes like this. And we won the thing against Venezuelan team. We had about 5 or 6 letters came from the Premier League, USA, and so on to the manager. Now that convinced me that themes could be a massive tool, and we use them from there on, different themes in different ways. But like you're saying, because we showed we would be playful, and we got this theme, those kids really bought into it, and it really was one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had in football. It was fantastic.
Did your Shakespeare teacher teach you all that?
Well, he could be another theme. As you say it, this book, Graeme sent to me. Yeah.
Look, hang on a minute. I have to say something, and this struck me. And I was talking.
just trumped you with Shakespeare quotes. So,
Rousseau.
Coming out with Rousseau, Shakespeare.
Whatever happened, if you look at playfulness, I remember, like the nutmeg. What's happened to that? I was talking to Dan Machichi the other day, and he was asking me, he said, what's happened to the nutmeg? Yeah, where's that gone?
What about the overhead kick?
Lionel Messi, who absolutely has fun with the game, nutmegs people all the time. And I know he can because he's him. But that's for teenagers. That's just the ultimate, especially when they call it out.
I would say as well, overhead kicks. Now, when did you learn overhead kicks? When you were playing 3-in-1, you were playing Wembley pairs. Now, does anybody coach overhead kicks in academies?
Well, you can't do that in concrete, can you?
It's one of the most enjoyable things you can do. I was lucky because my dad had been a top player and everything. Now, I'm just going to trump overhead kicks because my dad, because he'd seen Real Madrid playing in the 50s, he did an overhead handstand back heel where you hit it at his head, he dives forward, does a handstand, and then back heels it over his head. So, trumped you again, Holder. Come on, you've got to come back with something else.
I am being serious about some skills that have gone out of the game or seem to have gone out of the game for more precise skills. And I think that's important.
It's almost like some species are becoming extinct, aren't they? In this, as things get more serious, and some of the real arts and crafts, as well as some of the skills, it's easy for them to be lost or valued less. Yeah. In the stage phase, it's massive. It's interesting. We've had a couple of questions, but sort of linked to that. One from Graeme Nichols around positions and when should players be put in positions. And there's a one from Wayne Brown talking about the difference in players and especially in the early youth development phase and how we can sort of cope with that. And it links to a statement or a question from Hussein who asks about the role of small-sided games in the youth stage, and he asked the question, or is it mainly for the foundation stage? But if the small-sided formats and varied formats are massively important that we get the diet for the kids right, because it links to Ben Nicholson's question around street football, and is it something we need to explore more? So all these experiences, when we links back to the environment, so that's where the environment and the game formats come together to try and promote, because you need to feel it. If it doesn't match up, if you're in a really serious environment and we're expecting kids to explore and experiment with skills and their craft, it probably isn't going to work. So you need to get the atmosphere right as well as the format right. But from my point of view, before I pass over to the lads, it's a really important consideration around how we use small-sided formats still in the youth development phase for boys and girls.
I've got this thing about teenagers growing out of practices. Suddenly, you be seen because they're of a certain age, which is a load of nonsense. You could do practices and games that you did when you were 6, 7, and 8, and they're totally relevant at 16. They don't grow out of practices as such. The interesting thing about positions is, for some, positions are really important because there's a grassroots club near me where I know a couple of kids who absolutely are on their knees with confidence and need to play in a certain position because it helps them, and some don't. That's at grassroots level. It's about, there's different motivations for kids, but with the ones at clubs, I mean, surely you should be delaying the positional thing till you're absolutely sure. And when are you sure? But so by the time they're 16, they're probably they can play 2 or 3 positions in a certain slot. Earlier, if you're doing small-sided games, you're playing it all over the place. If you're playing basketball, you're going left, right, backwards and forwards, and that's 5 aside. Futsal, you tend to wander all over the pitch. And I think the small-sided game helps with the fact that the kids are able to play in different positions and on different sides of the pitch, which gets them thinking 2-sided, 2-footed, maybe that sort of thing. But don't anyone say to me that you shouldn't put kids into positions at 13 or too early for some kids. Well, we do it with goalkeepers, by the way, but for certain kids, it's really a safe place for them, and it depends who they are.
I think that type of thinking can come with the rush to 11v11 and serious football before they're ready for it. But that's sometimes when we talk about format. So sometimes there's a lot of discussions about either or. Is it small-sided football they need, or is it 11v11? The skill really is providing the right balance so that they might need some 11v11 experience. That's playing bigger pitches, get bigger, helps the awareness of the bigger spaces in the game. But also, they can also have the balance of varied formats.
Including people is really important. If you say to somebody, "Oh yeah, you should be playing 7 aside," and they haven't got the facilities to do that, so they've got about 7 subs. Yeah, they're better off playing 11v11. So everyone's included. You're better off playing than not playing. So it's about getting a balance, and it's not all about they can't do this or they can do that. It's what fits.
I think the biggest danger is that we can think at this age that, or the past that, they've gone past the foundation. They don't need to practice staying on the ball anymore because they're 12. So it was important for them last year when they're in the foundation phase and they could smile and have a nice time and express themselves on the ball. But as they grow, they still need to refine those skills and hone those individual skills and tactics, even as they grow through. And that's when small-sided games, as well as the bigger-sided games in 11v11, when they get there, that really helps them develop their
mastery. I'm playing 4v4. There's one ball between 8. I've got more chance of touching it and having, and including them and being part of this than in one between 22. But some kids need to be on the edge of games because of their confidence and stuff. They're not all, when you're dealing with mixed ability, it's really difficult.
Yeah, Graeme, I'd just like to touch back on the basically the playfulness and the skill side of it that we talked about, the nutmegs and encouraging the skills. Now that very much comes with having the right atmosphere to let them experiment with those things. How else do you get it? You role model it yourself. So at United, we had Jim Ryan, who was the director of youth many years, and he had some great sayings like intimidation by skill. That's what we wanted, not intimidation by force, but intimidation by skill. And in that sense, he also talked about the arrogance of timing, holding the ball to the right time, enticing people in, those type of things. So they would be really important. But to get those, you need to experiment. He was a great role model. He joined in. He was a fantastically skillful guy as well. So if you can role model it, that's good. But also a way to do it is to mix ages. So in playful way, not in the 11-a-side, so much in the 11-a-side sort of competitive game. I'm talking about in fun, like family playground games where you mix a broad range of players. We would do that at Man United. Marcus Rashford at 12 joining in with 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18. Pogba and Lingard at the same age. Now, what we said was they're a privileged spectator. They're right close up. Once one of these guys does it to you, then you start to think, oh, what did he just do? And so you're not just watching from the side, you're right in there. You get the feeling you're learning almost by osmosis. So fun games with older players mixed in, dragging it back. A lot of players come from playing with older brothers and sisters, and that playfulness certainly helps. But you can help that. So we had a game in a cage where we wanted lots of combinations. So we had 13 aside, but we used to make it even more playful by having sort of chocolate bars for the winners and all this sort of stuff to try and recreate it. Because there's no doubt that if you go in looking forward to it, fun, engaged, you get absorbed. But also there's, I think, a woman called Barbara Fredrickson in the States. She has a theory about broaden and build. If you go in happy, full of beans, just like a childhood game, not too serious, then your awareness broadens and you're able to then build on the cues that are around. So all those tiny little cues that you need are very much coming to the point. So that would be vital. And then just the other point on disguise. Disguise, you can look on it like this. You really need to be good at the fundamentals and the basics. So a good side foot pass, a good pass with the front of the foot, all those sort of things. In order to have disguise, you need to show someone a good picture of what he sort of expects. So say, for instance, if I'm the inside right player, I'm right midfield, and I'm going to play out to Noddy on the right, who's playing right wing. Noddy's outside his man a little blind side, and I play him the pass to his feet with the inside of my foot. And I feed him 2 or 3 times because I know he's tricky, and I play him there. And then the next time I make exactly the same motion, and then with a very small but late movement, I turn my foot and play it inside, and Noddy's reading it. He's inside. He's played out, outside the full-back for the ball. He's down the byline. Now, what you've done is just introduced disguise. So you've doubled your technical options. Where you were always playing with the inside of your foot here, now at the last second you can turn it in there, but you use the same body language and turn it in. So now you've just doubled everything you can do. And we can do that with nearly every skill. We can get a ball and we're receiving it from a throw-in, and we can just come square as a midfield player and volley it back to him, do it 3 times, volley it back, use the same motion, but then let it run across my body, and now I'm out. Now we've got 2 skills for 1. So we now got disguise. So you can coach it. But the big thing about it, though, is you need other players to play against to do that. You're not doing that against mannequins and cones necessarily, Sorry, Noddy.
No, I interrupted. I'm good at that.
I just say you were brilliant going down the line then. I spotted you run and you were in behind.
I'll have that. But the thing is the lads have got to be playful with their skills as well. And you're able to experiment with some of their skills, and then they'll develop their own style. I want to take you towards the social stuff, because kids of these ages, they do most of their playing and playfulness comes from being around their mates, and they want to be with their mates. So the social stuff's huge. And actually, the more socially integrated the group are, the more fun they have. That's funny and that's when you can step back more. The less socially integrated you are, the more you're inputting. And so that, therefore, I think that threatens it, because you're not in their group. You can have fun with them to a level, but you're not part of them. They take little jokes and whispers and so on and so forth. And when your back's turned, all sorts of carnage happens. Yeah. And they will giggle all day up to 16, 17, 18, and I think it's about recognizing that they need to be on their own as a group socially. So I'm a big fan of that. And anyone who's got the social stuff right and has got that diet, funnily enough, the kids tend to have more fun with the game. That's what I've observed anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Just on that, Paul, that's where when we're talking about the environment to start with, by crafting that and having the skill to frame it right, where you really value the social interaction and you value the input from the players and you listen to them. And as you say, they'll be developing their own independence and social fabric without you anyway. But if you can shape it in a way that it's safe, that there is some clear boundaries of that's all right, but that's going into something else. So because of personal boundaries and all that, but that is such a vital aspect to then get the stuff that Paul's talking about, to get that out, isn't it? I'm just backing up as you said. It's so vital, and that's a bigger role of the coach.
And that's something, where we're saying be light and be playful and so on, that doesn't mean the coach himself isn't serious about this. You have to be serious about thinking these playful things up. How playful can we be? So we were always very mindful of making sure I had the balance between hard work and play and so on. So what we used to do when we went on trips abroad or tours or tournaments, we used to take a bag of dressing up gear. So one of the nights, we would say as a squad of 16, 18, we'd put them into 3 teams. They'd have to come up with a sketch, a bit of a fun sketch, and perform it for each other. They'd have dressing up gear. And, we thought, well, this is a bit of fun, but it's also getting them used to maybe coming out of themselves. In the future, they're going to have to do interviews. They're going to have to be on TV. In fact, they used to have to do a pantomime for the whole of the club at Carrington. And so we thought, well, this is, and it was fun. But I definitely think that Barbara Fredrickson, Borden and Build, if you go in the next day with a fun attitude. So one time we did this and we had a theme we were preparing for the Nike Cup, where we knew we were going to be a smaller team against big, strong teams, because always we were on the younger side in the age group because it was January birthdays. So we'd had the theme to be, well, sort of resistance fighters in a sense, counter-attacking. So we watched the Rumble in the Jungle, which was Muhammad Ali on the ropes. You know, he's on the ropes, defending on the ropes, then came out on the counter-attack and beat George Foreman. We watched another film, Eminem, where he'd frozen and he'd on stage and he had to come back against the odds. And then the other one was Saving Private Ryan, where there was a small group of guys and these massive tanks were coming through and they had to sort of be resistance fighters against them. So on the way to training every day, we would be resistance fighters in the groups of 6. And I think who was on that trip? It was like Cleverly, Tom Cleverly, Corporal Cleverly, you take that group over there, zigzag, zigzag. Then it was Cathcart or whoever it was. It was Matty James over there. Then it was Norwood was in that group, or Drinkwater, I think. All these players. So he'd do all these, there's a hand grenade, you better get down. So you're just having a laugh going to training. Now, one day we got there to the training pitch and I went in to find the guy to open the dressing rooms. And I came back out. And I'm like, where are they all? I'm looking, they've gone. But in front of me was a big line of wheelie bins and they all jumped out of the wheelie bins right in front of me. And it was great that they could have such a laugh with the coach, because I think that then we went to work. Don't worry, we went to not work, but train hard, concentrate. But I definitely think that atmosphere allows them to, what you're doing is legitimizing creativity on the pitch as well by creating that. And you're legitimizing mistakes. By having that type of atmosphere all around, yeah.
I think if you looked at teenagers and the adolescents, they're dopamine factories, and dopamine is this happy, the natural happy thing that part a chemical that makes you feel happy. It's like eating lovely food, you get this reward, and these teenagers, they're dopamine factories, and so. How often do we sort of, and because of the social stuff, how often do we reward teenagers, in front of their mates? It has a huge effect on them. And when you chastise them, if that's what you're doing, or you challenge them, I use challenge, then you do that quietly. If you get that wrong, you've got a big problem. And how often do we see public criticism of kids, and that runs deep. The reward system for teenagers in this phase is really, it is so effective for them. So how much are we rewarding kids for imagination, for doing things right in front of their peers, and even for, if they picked up a bit of litter, saying, listen, well done, that's great, that goes with our culture, so on and so forth, and the way that they play. I think it's really important that you look at that and realise they're in this phase of adolescence where it's so important, the reward system, but public criticism is not good for them. On that,
sorry, Graeme, I'm coming in about 2 big points about that. Nobody should ever be telling off an under 16, giving him a or anything like that. He's a schoolboy. He's still at school. He's still maturing. Now, when they get into the full-time thing, you might do if he's doing something really wrong. Now of course you're going to give the advice to the kid if he's not quite, if he's not got it right. But anybody doing that with a schoolboy, for me, that was a golden rule. They're coming for fun. They're coming here to learn. Of course, part of that is, making sure they don't cross boundaries. But exactly as Noddy says, you're doing that in private and you're speaking to them personally. And then the other thing about the dopamine just springs to mind. That is what is one of the things that computer games are based on massively. That you get a hit of that when you go in and you get the enjoyment of progressing, and now you want to go up to the next level. Now, in that sense, this is very, very important in terms of the development of players and the transition from small-sided games to the big side. Because if you get it right, you get the basics, the fundamentals in place. So just like a computer game, you want to get accurate and consistent in hitting the target. So if it's a computer game that's one of these army games or something, you've got to get good at hitting the target. Now, that means your passing, your control's got to be accurate. Now, to also win in that, you've got to be good at scanning to shoot the other guys that pop out of wherever. But in football, you've got to be good at scanning. Now, once you've got that level and those basics, you jump up to the next level. Now you might be involved in 1v1 duels or in 2v1 situations or whatever. That's another level. You get the dopamine because you progressed, but you're still practicing all the things you did before. You know, you're still practicing them, and then you jump up to the next level. Well, it might be 6-a-side now, and now a few more things are added in. But you don't find the computer game guys going from level 1 accuracy and scanning to level 11 full-size game. You know, so part of the dopamine thing is the progress is vital, and the skill of the coach is to get the challenge point just right, you know, as well as getting repetition, you know.
I think just to summarize this bit, I think playfulness is getting the atmosphere through valuing playfulness and the returns that you can get for the kids learning. That's not about lessening the standards. Actually, by the social fabric and the culture that you're creating through the playfulness, they'll help explore their boundaries and like standards, if you like. So that's really important. It's not just about fun and enjoyment, which is really important, but it actually drives the learning. So getting the social setting right, because of all the things that Paul and Noddy have spoke about, is vital. I'm just going to play a couple of videos. The first one from Murph Roberts, who's our social development lead at the FA, with Phil Neville talking about what the environment means for him with the national senior team.
When we link creating a safe place for the players, particularly at this age group, with giving them the opportunity to explore their behaviours, is that football for many young people is a great place for them to do this. It's a real safe environment where they feel comfortable, where they feel passionate about why they're here. That allows them to explore some things that they might not be able to do in other parts of their lives.
I think the environment is massively important. That starts with your manner with the players. There's got to be an environment of encouragement, praise, direction. You want your players to be free, to express themselves, to not be afraid to make mistakes. I think that's where the encouragement comes in, and that helps the environment of actually players actually enjoying it. And if they enjoy it, they have that freedom. If they have that freedom, they'll express themselves.
So I just wanted to show that video because I think it summarizes the discussion in a way and highlights the importance of it. And sometimes we can think about the youth development phase. Like, is that do they need that stuff? Are they not past that? Do they not need the serious stuff? The interesting thing, when you hear Gareth Southgate and Phil Neville talking about the importance of the environment for senior players, it's still that's important. Yeah? So it's definitely important with the youth development phase. And someone else I just want to link to is a video of Phil Neville talking about the importance of developing individuality, and we've talked a bit about that. And continuing that from the foundation phase all the way through the journey, that it's still vital, even beyond the youth development phase, that players can still develop their own individuality.
Ultimately, to be successful, you've got to win games of football by scoring goals and by individual bits of brilliance. I think there's this massive thing in football at the moment about a collective team effort to win things, which you always need. But I think we've gone away from the actual individual bits of brilliance. I hope we're not suffocating the individualism in the game. So the things that I like to promote in my players is actually wingers playing 1v1, wingers having the ability and the freedom to beat somebody 1v1. And do you know what? If you're a defender and you have 10 1v1s, it only takes my winger to beat you once to cross the ball to score a goal. My forwards to be a little bit more selfish. So I'm trying to now promote within my team a bit more individualism to fit into a team collective shape.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go on, Noddy.
I've got a big thing about this style, players' style. We talk about, team style, when they play like this. I mean, what about individual style? How do players create their own style, And that's about allowing them to be individuals, being different, trial and error. That's how artists learn different styles. You know, they rub things out, they throw it out, and then they end up with their own style. I think players, you know, we talk about players' positions and we talk about this and their strengths, but what about their style? You know, the way they play.
Yeah, I think there's a bit about the style and about them developing a real appreciation for the craft. As you said, about the art, their individual sort of craft themselves. And I just say through these ages, I think as kids, they develop their self-identity, don't they? Generally, that's an age where they're really exploring that. And you see that through teenage years but I think that's the same in football, where it's a real important time that they figure out who they are as a player, and they can explore that and figure it out. So it's important we don't cap that sort of too soon. But I also think links with the general playing style and the atmosphere of how we expect or ask children to play. So just the last video. The last video on this is just around Gareth Southgate talking about the importance of to get to this playing style what we want as a nation, and we need to sort of shape the culture and the playing culture and value the playing style, or how do we reinforce those behaviours in the playing style?
There's no question when I watch grassroots football now and compare what's being encouraged to get it out of there and get it forward. When I started playing, generally speaking, we're light years further ahead in kids being allowed to express themselves and encouraged to play in a skillful way. Coaches will see the way that we're trying to get the England teams to play. You know, I think our under-17s were a brilliant case study in highlighting what we were looking for when we started this project in the style of play. Yeah, we wanted to create teams that win. But that's a byproduct of the right processes, the right way of playing, the right principles.
So, just linked to that, we think of the realities of how grassroots football links through academies and RTCs to national teams. It's all part of the same football and culture and football ideas, and regardless of the setting, to be able to play attacking and exciting football, the environment and the experiences that the kids get are vital within that. And there's a question I just want to link you back into around this. David Haley's asked about, do we coach individuals enough in the youth development phase? I'm guessing the team tactics at the end of it, when the adults will be dependent on the individual capabilities to some extent. What's your take on that?
Well, my take is that if the individual skills and tactics are not right, then whatever unit, whether you're in midfield, defender or forward, that's not going to work properly, and therefore the team won't work. So you have to have these individual things, but kids don't grow out of practicing it. What we need to do is we change our emphasis towards team formations and organisations, yeah, and then we start to shift towards that. If you've only got kids twice a week, what are you going to spend most of your time on? Because if you don't help them with the individual stuff, the team stuff won't work. In clubs where you got them 6 times a week, you've got far more opportunities to build in different practices, you know, as you work towards the game on a Sunday. So, excuse me, I do say that, do we coach 1v1s, and is there really 1v1s that go on in the game, or, you know, with 2v2s, 3v3s? You know, what I think David's getting at is about the individual skills at 1v1, both attacking and defending. And if I was to answer it, I don't think we do coach it enough. But it's the individual skills rather than 1v1s. It can be 2v2, but the individual skills in a 2v2 and 3v3, they're the things are more I think are more.
Yeah, and I think in the varied game formats, wherever the kids might play, it's also about just what lens have you got on as a coach. I know Paul talks about the quadrant, or almost the microscope of, it might be 11v11 that the kids are playing, but where you got your lens fixed at the team, or focus on individuals within the team, and a focus on how are the individuals actually getting on, as well as how's the team getting on. I think it's really important to keep that lens around the individual and how they connect with other players and start developing the connections and being able to see how they get on 1v2 or 2v1 or 3v2, all these sort of smaller combinations. You need to keep exploring and learning how to sort of maximize those sort of pictures and moments that they're in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why kids don't grow out of doing practices that you did at 9. So when David's saying, do we coach 1v1s, you would do 1v1s and you go, yeah, we'll do it at 7, 8. You know, it's absolutely vital. It's also important at 15, 16. So
I think, Graeme, the answer to the question is no. We haven't, over the years looked at the individual enough, and it is the team. There's a lot of reasons, maybe historically in our country, for it. One of the big things I would say is that we pass the ball early all the time. We play quick, we play tempo, we play give it and get it, 2 touch, go, play, move, and no doubt that's what happens the majority of time at the adult level. Well, if you start doing that too soon, then the players don't get enough practice at holding the ball for the right amount of time, for doing the individual thing, and so on. So it's a little bit like the computer games. If you keep repeating through the levels, those skills of dragging and dodge, but if you jump too soon up to the top level, then you don't get the full amount of practice there. Now, within all that, there could be a lot of reasons, because let's face it, in England, the 50s, 60s, 70s, the pitches were very poor. So you couldn't handle it and dribble so much or what have you. And you'd have to chip out the mud maybe. The pitches were bad. Now, also because of our national characteristics, strong, invading people, wanted to go forward quickly, all those things meant that we wanted the ball forward quickly. So there was less manoeuvring about with the ball individually, probably. Also, the way we interpreted the rules, the laws of the game, meant that we allowed tackles from behind, hard tackles with studs up, and so on. And that, of course, we grew up with that. We loved it ourselves. We loved the very macho nature of it. We all played it, of a certain age. But we have to understand now that has changed. The laws of the game are being interpreted in England, or should be, the Premier League level, the same way as in Europe, which means you can't tackle from behind. There's not the same. And I know a lot of us would prefer to see a good tackle, or what we think smashing the guy. But what it means now is you have more opportunity to hold the ball, to be more skillful, to hold it for longer. But maybe we haven't adapted and we're still playing it quick. And just a case in point, at any level, if you went abroad, and I went with my lad to Spain, and we stay in the hotel, there's a 6-a-side court. I said, get yourself down there. He's about 12, 13. Get yourself for a game. I followed him because I fancied the game. Ended up with 3 teams going on and off. And you know what they're going to be like. The Spanish waiter came with full kit, full rubbers, everything. He's there. You knew what he was like. He was a little, he thought he was Iniesta. But the difference was our lads, whether they be Irish, Scottish, or British, UK, Irish, they got it and they give it.
And Welsh.
Sorry, I missed them out. I missed them out. Sorry, my apologies. But they drew the player. They enticed him in and then slipped it and went. Or they went closer and flip the ball off at the last minute to draw and commit a man. They were better at that because they've, like Pete Sturgis has said, he's been banging the drum, stay on the ball, stay on the ball, stay on the ball. Now, as they get into this phase, if they're good at staying on the ball, they should develop staying on the ball for the right amount of time. So it might be 1 touch. Yeah, 1, 2, bang. It might be 2 touch most of the time, but they also need that ability to hold it till the right moment, till the arrogance of timing comes in, where you, like a matador, you draw him in, slip it round him with the outside, you foot, get the 1, 2, carry on. So it needs developing more, and the part of the problem is advancing too quick, and also the historical sort of problems that I've said before. But of course, we need to adapt, otherwise we won't compete. We're playing someone at their rules if we're not careful, and our rules don't exist anymore. I think
there's some of the things around.
Sorry, I've gone.
When we talk about individuals, I mentioned about development, sort of the craft, and that often leads us to think about skills and on the ball skills, as you say, and staying on the ball. And there's a couple of things with that. When I'm talking about craft, it could be all different types of the craft. It might be the sort of the art of interceptions and getting the timing right of interceptions. Now that's quite hard, but we're really in this phase. It's a great time, even in the foundation phase, you can start it, but reading and planning and getting the timing around interceptions, or different aspects of defending as well as attacking. So some of those individual things we're talking about, they're not just about the attacking, but it can be about the defending in different aspects. It might be finishing.
Defending, yeah.
Finishing. Yeah, and just the other thing which I want to link to, there's some tactical elements of the individual play. So when Paul's talking about staying on the ball for the right amount of time, it's then they can start exploring the reasons to stay on the ball. Is it to try and move away from pressure or go into the pressure to entice people? Or are you staying on the ball to change the picture? Are you staying on the ball to create space for yourself? Or you might be staying on the ball to create space for somebody else. So there's loads, you can go on, but it's then understanding we've got the skills to stay on the ball, why we're staying on the ball, and understanding it and having and then the connections with teammates around getting the right timing for the connection, both for the ball carrier and the receiving player. So it's developing the craft of those individual and collective capabilities as well as the team capabilities in this age phase, certainly 12s to 14s, which that's where the individual skills and tactics then connects with playing in 2s and 3s and 4s and units and then into the team when they've got that bit, when they're ready for it. Sorry, Paul, but were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, no, just exactly that. So, yeah, we've got to encourage that a little bit more. Now, certain things are core to that. So I don't see a lot of it, but dragging and dodging. Now, that mean you control it, kill the ball dead with the inside of your foot, and you shuffle, sidestep, little touch, then drop your shoulder and go. Now, one of the best in the world, he moved to Marseille, didn't he? Went from Newcastle, Spurs, and Marseille, was Chris Waddle. Absolute wizard. You know, he's the type of guy we should be having, talking to and say, well, how did you learn that? Show us the timing, the tips. You know, he's a wizard. We should be holding these guys up as an example and getting more people to try and look after them. Half the kids now probably don't know Chris Waddle, but we should be. He's one of the best players we've ever had. And that type of player, John Barnes, and going on the players we've got now, we've got some excellent young players of nowadays like Mason Mount. We've got Rashford, we've got Sterling, looking at dragging and dodging, because that you can entice the guy in. If you've got that complete control, you wait, and when the guy moves, bang, you go. Sterling's brilliant at it, changing his pace. So all of those things need stressing more. And how can you do that if you're saying to the guy, tempo, pass it? It's a change of speed that makes the difference. Not fast all the time. Of course, you need to go fast sometimes, but a change of speed and a change of direction and being crafty and cunning. Now, that's why I like to see that with kids. They need to encourage it. Now, let's face it, the more skillful things like this you can do, the more enjoyable the game is. And now once you've got past the individual things, the next step is how do you combine with people? Combinations. Well, Graeme's, was at the club that was a master of this at third man runs. If you look on the FA website, great stuff from Michael Carrick talking about third man runs. So combinations as well. All these things are things we need to really emphasize, definitely. And the more practice you get is with the more touches. And that's got back to Noddy's point, small-sided games. Small-sided games give you more repetition, more opportunities to practice. And when you've got that, just to go back to the computer game, you've got that in level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, you're now 11, 12. Now you go to 11 aside. Oh, well, it's natural. You've got all those skills.
And I just want to bring it back, Paul. I just want to bring it back to then the environment and the atmosphere as well within that needs to promote. If everyone's fearful of making mistakes, they'll never test those boundaries. When Phil Neville talked about Nikita Paris as a winger playing 1v1, the likelihood is a winger attacking a fullback isn't going to get past the fullback every time. So if they don't get the chance to have goals at that, and if they give it away every time they give it away or aren't quite successful. So Phil Neville's talking about that from his point of view with the senior women's team and the importance of that still. So if we don't have that tolerance and acceptance of the learning process and mistakes being part of that, then if there's a culture and environment of now don't do that on everything. Now we need to help kids and make good decisions and understand the game. And there is times where it's right to play it off and get it again. So I'm not saying that, but it's just the atmosphere as well as the experiences that they get in the small sided games and the practices. It's all interlinked. It's all part of the conditions for the players.
There's no question that trial and error and copying are the two big things about how kids learn the game. Trial and error is about challenging them to say, go on then, have a go. Yeah, have a go. And the problem in that, you've got to have high support with that. Otherwise, they don't learn. They just get disheartened. So if you're putting a high challenge environment in and saying, listen, I want you to, experiment and do that, you've got to tolerate the mistakes and deal with your expectations. If you don't want to tolerate them, then don't put a high challenge thing in and you'll miss an opportunity. So it is that support that's really important. And in teenagers, it is, but you can't just, in teenagers, it's essential for them to do that because there's a feedback mechanism. Oh, I've cocked up, right? Oh, blimey, I won't do that again. There's a lot of self-correction goes on.
Yeah, and I think, Noddy, as well, the big thing here is, do they notice what they did wrong or right? Do they notice what the top players do and try and copy it? And this is where you can be a guide for them, the coach, because there'll be certain things about, say, the timing. What was the timing? Or it could have been the change of speed, or it could be a better change of direction. So if you know the key things, you could then give them a few clues, or you just ask them, did you notice what happened? Why didn't you get past him this time? I didn't drop my shoulder enough. I didn't change pace enough. And so it's important you have the coach starts to develop a model in his head of what good play is, so that then he can refer to it. But instead of explaining everything, just pick out the one point and say, oh, what about the speed there? What was your change of speed like? Or did you notice how you beat him? Well, we'd do this with Marcus Rashford when he was learning to run behind the defence, and he'd say, well, oh, right, how come you laid the ball off then? What? Yeah, I didn't look over my shoulder, so I didn't know I could turn. So you're just checking them and asking a little question, but you've got the model in your head of what the real thing is.
Yeah,
but you don't to give them all the answers all at once.
The big question is to kids at these ages is, what were you trying to do? Sometimes it doesn't work, but what were you trying to do? If they were trying to do something and you go, blimey, that's a great idea, it didn't work, you can work on the execution. But how often do we look at the fact, oh yeah, he's given the ball away, but what was he trying to do? And that's they like that when they'll tell you, I was trying to do this, it didn't work. Now, obviously, the kid that keeps making mistakes over and over again, that's a different issue, but how often do we ask the question, what were you trying to do? What's your intention? Because I think that's a really important question, particularly in these ages.
I think just being interested and having that, as you said it before, Noddy, about the relationship, in that you need to build trust, but the relationship between the players and coaches does change slightly often in this age group. So there will be a bit of distance, and the strength of the peer group is so strong that not just are they probably more concerned about mistakes in some ways of what do the mates think or how do they frame it, as much as what the coach thinks. So that the strength of the peer group, both off the pitch, but also on the pitch, and how are they seen, and as you said before, the feedback that you give and how that makes them feel in front of the peers, in front of the mates as teenagers, is vital, and it can really compound it both ways.
Well, it's a huge skill for coaches who are working in professional clubs, say under 16, where the kids are looking for a career in the game and need a scholarship. It's a real tough ask, for coaches to go down things of, right, let them experiment and stuff like that. But it's really important they do it, but you have to be real good managers and real good. I really respect the coaches that do that, because you're looking at trying to keep them teenagers, but those teenagers are going, well, I don't want to make too many mistakes because I won't get a scholarship, so on and so forth. So that's a big challenge, and that's hard. That's hard to manage. I get that. The demands of, looking for a career in the game and making mistakes, but it's a cultural thing. If it's all done at the club and it's always been done, then they'll do it.
And it comes back to the start. I think it's hard. This is maybe it's me, but it's hard coaching players. It's hard coaching teenagers.
Oh, God.
They'll test you, they'll challenge you, they'll throw. So there's coaches out there thinking, God, it's hard work when I'm coaching this under 14s group.
I tell you,
The chances are everyone else is thinking, I've faced some challenges as well because of the individual differences, the stages of development they're going through, the stage of maturation, the way the brain's developing, the behaviours. So yeah, teenagers are like made to challenge.
mate,
Challengers.
they are phenomenal creatures. Listen, they're ready for the zombie apocalypse tomorrow, but they're not ready to wash up today. Do you know what I mean? And my son, I think he nicked it from somewhere. He said, "Listen, I'm making some changes in my life, and if you don't hear from me, you're one of them."
But I think that in putting in grassroots land, if you like, and the variation of where football takes place across grassroots, from real pick-up football in inner city cages and those types of settings to grassroots club settings, and kids will vote with their feet. So
yeah,
it's really important to understand why they come and what they want from their experience, and what our role then is as coaches to provide that experience for them, both as kids and as players. So for some in grassroots, they'll still have aspirations to play as high as they can, and maybe looking for some slightly different experiences, or probably asking a little bit different from you as the coach to someone that wants to play with the mates and are there for a real social engagement. But I think in all of it, the key is around trying your very best to understand the players that you're coaching, trying to consider the stage that they're at, why do they come, where are they in their journey, what have they had before. If they're not sure about football, it might have been because they've had a prior past experience that wasn't so good, or if they're coming because they love it and they've got that real love of the game coming from the foundation phase because they've had a great experience, as we started with. Brilliant, but make sure we're not the person that puts the flame out, whatever we do.
no, but
So for all the stuff we've talked about the coaching, it always comes back to the love of the ball and the love of the game and the spirit of football and the spirit of the essence of the game, that we don't lose sight of that as the kids get older and the game can become more serious. Or also, if we try to provide an experience for the kids that doesn't match up to their intentions, because if I might, as a coach, want it to be really serious, but if the kids don't want that, and you try and provide something because that's what you want it to be, you really lose kids in the difference in this age group, so they just won't come. So that's an ongoing challenge.
The best coaches I've ever seen in this age group, and I've seen several of them over and worked with several of them, are the ones that love working with teenagers and enjoy their company. Yeah. Enjoy being with them as people, their company. Also, they're pretty much teenagers themselves, but they're just a bit bigger and a bit uglier, So they're the ones. But if you said, right, what are you actually doing? You're teaching young people a game. How much do you know about teaching? How much do you know about young people? And how much do you know about the game? And predominantly, the teaching and how much do you know about young people is normally the ones that you score quite low on, probably know a lot about the game. So I think it's really that you put those three things together, and if you can nail those three things, you're halfway there. But you've got to stay a teenager yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that, Noddy. You've got to get into character, whichever age group it is, the under 10s, 12s, 14s, what have you, to get to their level sometimes. Otherwise, it's a bit like being at school. You need to be playful. You need to make it like that. I'm going back to my Rousseau philosophical quote. Childhood has its own way of seeing, thinking, feeling. Nothing is more foolish than to try to substitute ours for theirs. We shouldn't be imposing our adult game on those kids while they're still children. Let them still have a childhood game, and then they'll get the benefits out of that. They'll have that freedom of spirit, role play, trying things. And there's enough time for them to get to all the other things, to touch, so on. But when they get there, they'll have the skills embedded to drag, to dodge, to turn, to intercept, to do whatever, because they'll have had enough repetition in childhood play. Yeah, not the adult premature professionalism.
And with that, I think it's just remembering when we're coaching in this age group, regardless of the setting, of the impact that you can have on young people in their lives, really. and that for all the technical stuff that is important, we'll get the social setting right and the social fabric, and actually remember the importance of being a role model and your role in setting the boundaries and setting the expectations and making it a safe place for players to come so they can be themselves and express themselves and don't need to seek permission to sort of be themselves within the setting that you're in. So this is just the final video, just to wrap up, from Gareth Southgate talking about the importance of your role as a coach and whatever setting you're in, working with young players in this age group.
You also have a big role to play in their life. You know, some kids' home life is really complicated, and maybe you're one of the role models in their life. I don't think we should ever underestimate the power of that, the responsibility of that. So you can impact on young people in a really positive way. And I go back to something I said earlier, that young people need adults usually to believe in them, to give them a chance, to treat them well, respectfully and fairly, and to give them time and attention in the right ways. So it's brilliant that people keep volunteering and doing what they do.
So just to wrap up, I think not that I need to add anything to what Gareth Southgate said, but it can be challenging work with teenagers. It's worth it. You might not get the thanks now if you're looking for thanks. You might not get the payback now from them, but maybe in the long term you do. So it's worth sticking by them and believing in them. And it's important for us all to enjoy it, as well as making sure they enjoy it in the environment, the experiences, in seeing them as individuals. Forget that bit right. They will play with freedom, and then you'll get the football returns that we've talked about as well. So from Paul, from the two Pauls, and myself, massive thanks. Hope it's been valuable and enjoyable. And please feel free to contact us on Twitter if you've got any follow-up questions or any comments to keep going. Thanks for your contributions. Thanks for
about Shakespeare.
And yeah, had a bit of everything in there, I think. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.